Hi, I'm Edward C. Tolman,
And I am B.F. Skinner.
and we're going to talk about our views on intervening variables. But let's start with some intro first. Psychology was not always an interest of mine, you know. I obtained my undergraduate degree in chemistry at MIT. After taking summer courses from Harvard philosopher Ralph Barton Perry and Harvard psychologist Robert Yerkes, my interest shifted to philosophy and psychology. Most influential to myself, however, was William James's Principles. However, the fact that psychology is still being defined as the study of conscious experience troubles me. For how can one build up a science upon elements which, by very definition, are said to be private and non-communicable? After learning about J.B. Watson's behaviorism approach and objective measurements to psychology, my troubles were put to rest and I was able to continue my education and interest in psychology.
I was born on March 20th in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, into a warm, stable, middle-class family. My mother and father raised my younger brother and I on strict moral standards. I performed poorly in science but fantastic in literature, which I further studied and received my bachelor's degree in, along with the Phi Beta Kappa key, at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. Robert Frost's work influenced me to be a writer, yet sadly I wrote nothing of importance, so I decided literature had failed me. However, I did read the works of Pavlov and Watson while in Greenwich Village and decided to enroll in the psychology graduate program at Harvard in 1928. I suddenly felt that I'd found my niche, so I threw myself into my studies with a very disciplined schedule. This schedule allowed me to receive my master's degree in 2 years and my doctorate in 3. I remained at Harvard for the next 5 years as a postdoctorate fellow. I also taught at other schools, but ultimately returned to Harvard until my death in 1990. My greatest influences were Bacon and Mach. I was fascinated by Bacon's idea that science should be descriptive, inductive, and avoid theories. He suggested that scientists should first look at the empirical facts and then infer knowledge from those. Bacon's main point was that scientists' basis, misconceptions, and beliefs could manifest themselves into a search for objective knowledge rather than subjective. But I feel rather indebted to Mach, for he inspired me the most. Not only did he believe that science should rid itself of metaphysical concepts, but he also inspired me to see how facts correlate with one another. It is here where I created the functional analysis, my approach to studying the systematic relationship between behavioral and environmental events.
Thank you, Skinner. But I suppose you would like to know some of my views now. I believe that not only purpose is a determinant of behavior, but cognition as well. I do not think that mentalistic concepts are only descriptions of behavior. Behavior is governed by more or less complicated sets of patterns of adjustment, which get set up within the organism, not just one-to-one stimulus-response connections. Cognitive processes really do exist and are influential to determining behavior. I am going to imagine that if I were a rat, I would behave. You may be questioning my beliefs because there is a dilemma between my mentalistic and behaviorist views. Not to worry, I have a solution on how to treat cognitive events: intervening variables. This is defined as variables that intervene between environmental events and behavior. These variables are tied to observable behavior. This means my theoretical terms are operationally defined, not just a label. Purpose and cognition, as I mentioned earlier, are theoretical constructs that are used to describe, predict, and explain behavior. But now back to intervening variables. With this, I am bringing abstract scientific theory into psychology. I am not satisfied with just noting that what organisms do in certain situations, but why. There are three classes of variables in my approach. 1. Independent variables: environmental events, stimuli, and past training. 2. Intervening variables: purpose, behavioral adjustments, theoretical concepts, internal cognitive processes, definable and measurable but not observable. And 3. Dependent variables: behavior. With this model, it shows that environmental events or experience gives rise to internal events that in turn cause behavior. You cannot just know behavior based on the environmental events that happen. You must know the internal, intervening events they initiate also. To display this, let's look at when an animal is placed in a T-maze, a new place and new experience for that animal. Previous experience could not be used here then. The animal will come up with a hypothesis based on reinforcing the animal with food when turning one way through the maze. The animal can now ponder alternatives, which I call vicarious trial and error. The animal now develops beliefs and expectancy that if I turn a certain way, I will get food. This entire process is what I call a cognitive map, an awareness of all possibilities in a situation, and shows how these things intervene with experience and behavior. Now, rather than just describing an organism's behavior, these intervening variables explain it.
Oh, Tolman. When scientists use my objective approach, they are analyzing the relationship that is obvious to the naked eye, and at the same time, eliminating problems associated with the study of mental events that cause behavior, like thinking, choosing, or willing. I believe you just call them intervening variables. But I disagree with your idea that these intervening variables, like consciousness, play a role. How do we, the scientists, at the present time, know which internal events people are responding to, and that is causing the objective behavior to occur? Take my Skinner box, for example. I placed a rat in my box and let it explore freely. When I saw the rat press a lever to escape from the box, I reinforced the rat with food immediately, then conducted the experiment again. Over and over, the lever pushing time was quicker than the last. Was his consciousness telling him to push the lever the entire time? Did he will himself to do so? What was the rat thinking? You see, I do not know, but even more so, I do not care. What I do know is that the rat was participating in operant behavior, and my observation was that the rat learned to push the lever and escape because it was being reinforced with food, all with the naked eye. I believe that the reinforcement contingencies the environment provided determined which behaviors would be strengthened and which would not. Thorndike's instrumental conditioning gave me this idea, and this is where I developed my ideas of reinforcement schedules. I do not deny that these internal physiological events in people exist, or that this science of subjective experience should not be studied, but it should be studied independently from mine.
Well, we have enjoyed our time sharing our views with you, but we must lay ourselves back to rest and be remembered by the future of psychology everywhere.